Hello and welcome to my podcast where I will be talking about the Dion Quintuplets. I'm your host, Mateo, and in today's episode we will be talking about the book The Miracle and Tragedy of the Dion Quintuplets by Sarah Miller. This book tells the story of the Dion Quintuplets, the 5 identical sisters born in Ontario, Canada in 1934. Their birth was a medical miracle, but their lives were filled by tragedy and exploitation. Today we will explore the impact of the exploitation of the Dion Quintuplets and their legacy. The Dion Quintuplets were born to Olivia and Elzire Dion, a French-speaking couple who lived in Canada and already had 5 children. The odds of quintuplets surviving in 1934 were slim, but the Dion Quintuplets thrived, and their birth became worldwide news. People came from all over the world to see the babies, and they became a major tourist attraction. However, their parents were not ready to handle the publicity, and the government of Ontario declared the babies wards of the state and took them away from their parents. This caused mixed emotions, but the decision stuck. The government built a hospital for the quintuplets and hired a team of doctors and nurses to take 24/7 extreme care for them. The babies were studied extensively, and all of their moves were documented. They were not allowed to see their parents until they were 9 years old, and their parents were only allowed to visit them in the hospital once a week. The government used the baby's image to sell products, and they were not paid for endorsements. I didn't mean they were not allowed to see their parents. I meant they weren't allowed to go live with their parents until they were 9 years old. And, of course, their parents could visit them once a week. The exploitation of the Dion Quintuplets had a profound impact on their lives. They grew up in a hospital, isolated from their family and the outside world. They were not allowed to attend school or make friends outside of the hospital, and they were never given the opportunity to develop their own identities. When they were in their teens, they were allowed to leave the hospital, but due to their weird childhood, it was hard for them to adapt to the outside world. They were constantly hounded by the media and could never escape their public image. These were several attempts to help the Dion Quintuplets, but they were largely unsuccessful. The government of Ontario tried to improve their living conditions, but they continued to be exploited for their image. The girls eventually sued the government for the control of their own lives, and they won. They were able to reclaim their image and earn money from their endorsements. However, the damage had already been done, and the girls continued to struggle with the effects of the exploitation. In an article I found online from We Were 5, the memoir they wrote, I think it was just Yvonne Dion, one of the quintuplets tells us about the impacts that their exploitation of her life had on her, and she writes, "We were never allowed to be normal children. We were always on display, always being studied. It was a terrible way to grow up." This quote illustrates how big of an impact that the exploitation had on the girl's childhood. And all of these events were harsh experiences that really shows how much of a different and harsh childhood the Dion sisters had to go through in comparison to the normal teenager and most of us students here at Kingwood High School. Even with all of these events happening throughout their life, the Dion Quintuplets managed to come out of and go home at 9 years old. These sisters all came out alive, and 2 are still alive today, being aged 88. In conclusion, the exploitation of the Dion Quintuplets was a tragic chapter in their lives. They were taken from their parents, studied extensively, and exploited for their image. The impact of their exploitation continues to be felt to this day. While there were attempts to help them, they were largely unsuccessful, and the legacy of the Dion Quintuplets serves as a reminder of the dangers of exploitation and the importance of protecting the rights of the children. I'm finished with my podcast. Thank you for tuning in and listening to my project-inspired podcast, and I hope to have the chance to present to y'all my opinions and thoughts later this year. Good night to my fellow students.